Thanks everyone for coming. We'll need to start. The schedule is quite short. Welcome to this panel discussion. My name is Andris Berzins. I'm chairman of the co-working space Tech in Riga, and I'd like to introduce the panel on addressing the digital divide. The format, as you now know, is 3 short presentations and then a discussion. I'm going to be quite brutal about the presentation time so that we can have maximum time for discussion. So I'd like to kick off with Jaan Priisalu from Estonia, who is the Director General of Estonia's Information Systems Authority and used to be Head of Risk Management for Swedbank. Mr. Priisalu, if you could start.
Okay, thank you. Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, I will talk about the burden on our citizens when they are crossing the border, I'm leading the Estonian Information System Authority, and its task is actually to connect the different institutions in Estonia. Next slide, please. And I would like to talk about this burden what we are posing on our citizens when they are moving the data on the papers over the border. Now, one concrete example is between the Estonia and Finland. We are moving the medical insurance certificates. If the form number is E101 and tens of thousands are printed out in one side actually and inputted into the other information system, and it's not very reasonable way to do, and all those people actually have to waste their time with those papers. Next slide, please. And in doing so, we had the same problem in Estonia, and I think that all the Nordic countries have been tackling this problem inside their countries. And we have came to the system that we call X-Road, that is standardizing this information exchange. And right now there is around 3,000 services on this system. They are ready and they are operating. And last year we made about 300 million transactions on the system exchanging the data internally. And what I would like to do is actually to expand this data exchange regionally. Next slide, please. And in the Europe we are talking, when we are talking about the common market, then we are talking also about the many relationships, and this is one slide from the project eSense. And if we draw all those even this simplified slide, if we draw the links between all the actors, then we get 6 of those. So this picture will go quite complicated. But I believe that the basis of it is actually the communication between the administrations. So I would like to do something about it, and if we actually get the administration communicating, then I also believe that other relationships will follow. Next slide. And here is the list of the services where we have committed to do the international cooperation. All those services are existing, and so it means that there is a technical solution and people behind it, and we are ready to connect with the other countries if we can get the cooperation going on. Next slide, please. And the question what I have actually to you is that what would be this place actually to start with? It is clear that we can build this kind of gradual process actually starting from the separate links actually, and then gradually building it up and thus also building the experience and getting wiser together and finally reaching these goals that people don't have actually to carry around the papers. And I also believe that in doing so we can actually build the administration processes that are crossing the borders and that are quicker than the today's system. So I propose actually to automate those things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's a great summary, and of course the Estonian startup approach to think about doing something quick and iterating is a great way to start. So Joanna, I'll ask you to be next. Joanna Shields, CEO and chair of Tech City in the UK, is an entrepreneur herself, used to run Facebook in Europe and a number of other companies before. Joanna, please.
Yes, in fact, I joined this forum last year.
Yep, if you press the button.
I joined the forum last year as a speaker, as well in Stockholm. But today I'm talking about a very different topic. Today I'm going to talk about, it says strengthening business competitiveness, but it's more about the overall economy and the role that entrepreneurship can play in that. Late last year, I got the call to serve in government. It's my first opportunity to do so. And the mission was put to me in such a way that I couldn't refuse. As a private sector person, as an entrepreneur, technology and innovation are close to my heart, and I really felt like it was an opportunity to join and apply years of scaling and growing businesses to a government pursuit. So the role I was given was to champion entrepreneurship and try to turn Britain into this high technology powerhouse. Fortunately for me, the high-tech sector is the highest growth sector for us. It's grown 11% over last year, and we have the highest growth rate, or one of the highest growth rates in the G20. So that's a fortunate part of stepping into this. The other part of it is that there is a movement underway in Britain, and I think I would say, you can go to the next slide, sorry. There's a movement underway in Britain, and it relates to the fact that after 4 or 5 years of a tough economic environment, people are no longer waiting for big companies to start hiring again. They're not waiting for the government to give them a job. They're actually thinking about their own, building their own businesses. So we've had record numbers of new businesses starting up, which is really encouraging. So stepping into this is quite exciting at this moment. We also have a very big unemployment problem with the youth. So the 18 to 24-year-olds have 18.5% unemployment. So entrepreneurship is a viable option for these young people to, take all these creative ideas that they're learning about in school and that they have about the world growing up in this new millennium generation, and to apply that. So if you go to the next stage. So we've come up with a mission for Tech City, and the mission is to help make the UK the best place in the world to imagine, start, and grow a business. Now, coming into government from the private sector, I think like an entrepreneur. So we've actually broken our policy and initiatives into these 3 categories, because these are the stages of growing a business. So if you go to the next slide on the imagine front, we literally have to inspire a new generation. So we've got to come up with ways to make entrepreneurship cool. So we're working on a national campaign, which I'd love to share with you all. Hopefully by next year at this time it'll be well underway. That's called I Am Epic, and it's about, young people say epic all the time. It's kind of a trendy word. And it's about, I can do this. I am strong enough to actually create a business on my own. And we're working on the digital skills side quite a lot. We're doing some work this summer on something called Summer of Code, and bringing young people together in entrepreneurship, apprenticeship schemes, and various other things. So a whole host of policy initiatives around imagining a business, or creating the environment for people to imagine a business. If you go to the next slide. In the startup phase, actually we've had some very strong success here, and built over the past 2 years since the initiation of Tech City as an entity, tremendous amount of opportunities for entrepreneurs around reducing capital gains, investments in IP that are virtually tax-free up to 10 million. You only pay 10% tax on your innovations up to 10 million pounds. And enterprise investment schemes, seed enterprise investment schemes that foster more angel money coming into the economy. So that's been very, very positive. The next slide is our biggest challenge. But I'm happy to say 2 weeks ago we announced with the London Stock Exchange a new high growth segment. So we're actually helping our established businesses consider the equity markets in the UK versus many times in the UK we'd have a great success story and they would leave our shores, take all their jobs with them and go to NASDAQ. So we've got to prevent that. So what we're trying to do here is, and this encompasses all of European countries as well, and Nordic and Baltics, is to create London as the alternative market for a high growth segment. So very excited about the developments there and think we're on the path to supporting the growth side of the business. And I think finally the last slide, really I've been around the country in the last couple of weeks speaking at universities mainly, and even high schools, you know, secondary schools. And this is the last slide I put up, and I say that the next great idea could come from someone in this room. And I truly believe that this next generation, they've grown up in this always-on digital, social, and connected world, and they're very different thinkers. They know how to actually, you know, you may worry about your children playing games for hours on end, but the reality is they're learning strategies and they're learning to think on their own and independently, and many of the same attributes that entrepreneurship requires are being developed in more kids than ever today based on the digital activities that they engage in. So I could not be more optimistic about the younger generation. In fact, the secondary schools ask me the best questions. The universities ask good questions. The young people ask incredibly great questions. So very positive that we're on to something. And so anything that we can share that we're developing, we're opening something called the Tech City UK portal. So you'll be able to have access to that. You can, you know, download any of our, you know, papers, ideas, whatever you want. It's open for all. We're an open systems country, so that's what we believe in. Liam's Maxwell, our CTO, is speaking on another floor at the moment, but we're happy to share. So thanks very much.
Great, thanks, Joanna. Appreciate it. So next I'd like to ask Petteri Koponen from Finland to talk. Petteri is founding partner of the venture capital firm Lifeline Ventures. He'll talk about their investment in Supercell, a very successful gaming company. He's also a board member at startup Sauna, an accelerator program at Aalto University. Please, Petteri.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here. So I'll talk about Supercell as a case study of a European super high growth company and what were the kind of essential things that helped the company in the beginning, and now that it's in a growth stage, which are the next challenges. So if we go to the first slide, just very briefly about the company. It's the global leader in tablet games. Supercell has launched 2 games in the summer of 2012. So this is a very short history. The games are making more money than all the 969 games of Electronic Arts, for example. So it's a very profitable company with 80 employees. And it's very Finland focused. It's a global company, but almost all the employees are in one office in Finland. It's actually the old Nokia research center. 7 empty floors, and Supercell is taking 1/4 of the one floor. So it's a very symbolic place to be. And it has raised a relatively significant amount of capital from mainly London-based investors, and I come to this later. So next slide, please. So this is a typical startup founded in 2010. 6 founders, all are games industry veterans, and games industry is kind of special in Finland. It's we have 20 years of history there and very strong grassroots efforts. Like we had a thing called a demo scene where young programmers, young talented hackers just tried to get everything out of the computers, Commodore 64s and back in 80s, and it has continued and gotten stronger. And if you go to any of the, I think about 130 Finnish game companies, the core developers are almost exclusively from the demo scene. So it's super influential. And there's a yearly event called Assembly, where about 5,000 hackers come and they play games and they program and they show their demos, and so it has just gotten stronger. So this grassroots effort is super important, and it wasn't, I mean, it was just a few private persons and the first demo groups that started this effort, and hasn't been supported by the government at all. Another important thing is that we had a first wave of startups in late 90s, where they were the first game companies, the first graphics companies. Many of them failed. A few got acquired. Nothing huge, but still we have serial entrepreneurs who know games, and we have developers who have worked in both Finnish and international game companies. So we have kind of the basis for like really successful companies. What we don't have, and this is a huge problem all over Europe, even in the UK, where the situation is probably the best, we don't have angel investors. Like if we think about games or web in general, we have a handful of people who have made a successful exit. And in the Valley, there's probably like 5,000 or 10,000 of those. So the situation is completely different. So that's why our government funding agency, TechS, plays quite an important role. Like they have a very low bureaucracy system for matching private funding. And typically the ratio could be even 2 to 1. So with 100,000 of angel funding, TechS may give a loan of 200,000 euros. And it's pretty easy to get, and they're not trying to use judgment that much, because it's almost impossible in the beginning. Like even us as professional investors, but we make a lot of mistakes. So for public officials, it would be even more difficult. And then the last point, and I realized that if you go back, it's the fact that the global investors are more active in Finland, and it has become one of the handful of areas in Europe where they actively working, and most of the investors are actually from the UK. So the last slide, please. So if I think about, let's say, policy recommendations, the things that work really well in Finland is the TechS model, then these grassroots initiatives, and I don't know how to increase them, but they're just a very essential part of the ecosystem. If I look at any of the really good initiatives, there's the grassroots component always there. And then when I made the slides, I realized that we're quite dependent on the London-based major VCs. There's probably just like from 5 to 10 major VCs, Index, Axel, Balderton, a few others. And if those VCs would disappear, I think the whole Europe would be in trouble. And one of them already did, Atlas Ventures. So this is really, really important. What we need now, if the company has grown, like, it hasn't published any numbers, but a while ago there was a talk about $1 million per day, and it could be much more today. So the revenue is already quite significant. So what to do now? It's actually about growing in Finland, addressing top talent, and of course it's hard to get top talent to London, and it's even harder to get top talent to Helsinki. So that's our biggest challenge, and and the government could actually do a lot there. The IP taxation. The taxation is usually never a problem for a startup, but if you have a very successful startup and you start paying taxes and you have international investors, then you start figuring out like what's the globally most efficient structure. And so we would need a European-wide, unified, reasonable taxation, I think. And the last one is the European Stock Exchange. Like, we have these small stock exchanges all over, and like all of them are already too small for Supercell. So I would really love maybe the London-based, like the major stock exchange, that would probably would be good for. So we would have Finnish companies that could easily list to London or Swedish companies and so on. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Petteri. So we have sort of two themes running through this this conversation. One with which Jaan started about e-governance, and the second, which Joanna and Petteri were talking more about in terms of ICT tools for competitive and efficient business environment. So we'll, I think, divide the discussion a little bit into those two sections, and we'll start with the second. So obviously Finland and the UK have some great examples of things that have worked well, and maybe I'd like to open the floor with a discussion about what the participants think are things that could be replicated elsewhere. What are the lessons that we can take and use elsewhere in other countries? Because obviously in Latvia, for example, we would love to have as vibrant a startup scene as Finland has, for example. Anyone want to start? Yes. And if you can just briefly state your name and role, that'd be great.
Yes,
thank you.
Birgit Norgard, I'm from the Danish delegation. And I think what could be most easily replicated is looking through the papers that we got from the various countries. I got a lot of knowledge from the incentives that are around in the UK, because I think most of our countries would face the same problem that the last speaker alluded to, namely the lack of funds for venture capital. And if and obviously capital is a scarce resource these days. We need business angels to fund seed capital, and they are not going to do that if there are better investment opportunities. So the whole issue, if you look around or look, for instance, from the Danish scene at venture capital, it is mainly state supported. And that is a problem. It's a problem because that also means that as soon as the companies develop, they need to go to the UK or US, and they tend to stay there because the markets are bigger, and it's maybe also easier to access talent, and we lose the potential to create jobs from it. So the whole issue of how do we make sure that we get enough European funding, private funding, to match state funding is, in my mind, one of the key issues that we need to think about. And I think the initiatives that have been taken in the UK are extremely interesting in that respect.
Yeah, so you have an initiative in the UK specifically for supporting angel investors, right, with a tax incentive. Maybe you can clarify on that specifically.
Oh, sorry. We have a seed enterprise investment program that is incredibly generous for investors. Up to 50% is reduced from a tax perspective. So, but I think the other thing that happens is you can have great policies, but it's connecting the dots for entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs don't think about these things. They think about growing a business. And so I often feel like we need to package this into an offer, and that's why we think about it in stages of growing a business. You know, because at different stages you need different things. And people are just so busy building their companies, they don't realize what's available to them, and they miss opportunities. So we as a government are almost kind of acting like a concierge service and kind of saying, well, have you thought about this, and making it aware. And we have in Tech City, for instance, we have events literally every night. We bring in accounting firms and lawyers, and we have they run free surgeries, we call them, so access to information. And you have to tap into that vibe and constantly be feeding the community or the cluster with that energy, because people building businesses are too busy, and they miss things. And they miss opportunities that way. So we try to think like a business and package this up in an offer that they can understand, absorb, and take advantage of. So the consumer in this case is the business, or the investor as well.
Yeah, I think the problem is the very early stage, because by definition it's very local. So you need to have local angel investors. But if you go later stage, then the good companies, at least if they're kind of international-minded growth companies, they should be able to raise capital, because if they can't raise capital, then they can't grow. an international business. So sometimes the entrepreneurs say that we would need more local VCs who would do later stage investments and so on. But actually these London or European-based bigger investments, they know how to invest abroad because most of their investments are not in their home country. So that's actually not, I think that's not a real problem. It's the very early, the angel phase.
And in the UK, the angel phase is very well developed. It's the next phase where we have a hole, the gap. So maybe it's an evolution. And then, then you have the big funding sources. But the angel networks are also very strong. I mean, just pulling together high net worth individuals who might want to start doing this as angel investors. It's funny because, we have a lot of high net worth individuals who retire, but then they like to use their skills and engage in helping small businesses. And you'd be surprised how easy it is to pull together around a financing from, people. But you have to sort of put those people in the same room. I mean, many times you don't think that, many of the high net worth individuals in Finland aren't aware of the startups that are happening.
I think that's right. I was going to say that I think that Joanna's right that the tax incentives is very important, but it's a sort of necessary but not sufficient condition. It's a culture. Right. And frankly, I'm old enough to remember that, in the UK, we used to bewail the fact that we didn't have that culture and the Americans did. And why did all of the rich people in the UK buy racehorses and yachts and big houses rather than investing in businesses? And I think we're still not, we're still a long way short, as you pointed out, of the Silicon Valley culture, but we've made strides. And I think trying to bring together, I mean, I know that in certainly some of your countries you have very wealthy family business groups, trying to get them to think of themselves as this is part of their role in society. That's the key.
Please.
Thank you. Siim Sikkut from Government Office of Estonia. I'm sorry if I divert the discussion a bit, but I just have a question to Joanna Shields, but to others as well, is that, it's one thing to talk about the tech sector. So basically we're talking about ICT business, right? And which is a crucial part of economy. We in Estonia are lucky to have one and so forth. But what we are thinking as the next thing beyond that even is that, okay, how can we really take technology into other companies, other businesses and sectors as well a lot? And so my question there is that, that's where, again, more jobs are at. That's where a lot of, productivity challenges are and so forth. Do you in Tech City also sort of work or do something along those lines? I mean, Tech City is all about clustering the tech sector, but also do you try to branch out somehow and sort of actually make the tech sector focus on other sectors as well?
First of all, again, sorry, I'm not learning very well. First of all, the digital economy is somewhat of an oxymoron now because, everything is digital. So it's a bit silly to even talk about it anymore. It's like ICT. We should just retire the term once and for all. But what we're finding is various clusters have strengths. And, like we have one cluster in the UK that has a life sciences strength. And so it's really tapping into the companies that are there, the research that is fueling those types of businesses, the universities, what's taught in that area, and sort of working to the unique strengths of that cluster. So we have not done this in the UK, but this is an aspirational goal. We'd like to bring together, bring out the best in all those areas of the economy and focus on the strengths and let each cluster sort of thrive in their area of expertise. But we haven't done that yet, but that's something we want to do.
Great, thanks. That was actually one of my questions coming up, so it was very, very, very well timed. I guess the next question, and Joanna touched on it in her presentation, is around education, because obviously this is not something that's going to change overnight, and the question is whether there are opportunities in education, like the UK is doing elsewhere, that we can encourage young people to be excited about two things. So one, using the digital information in these services, but also being entrepreneurs and starting businesses. Anyone have thoughts to kick that one off? Why don't you,
I
Joanna?
can talk forever about this topic. What's really exciting to me is we're starting to see young people taking an interest in learning to code, and There are 4 or 5 startups in Tech City alone that are actually teaching code for young people, but also for older people who are coming back into the workforce to need to develop new skills. And so I'm pretty excited about the ecosystem building around code and learning about code. But the one thing I would caution is in schools, you know, if you're not very good at it, suddenly you feel like you're not good at something else. And there's enough kids out there feeling bad that they're not good in math or science. So we have to be careful that this digital economy means opportunities for all. You know, the great thing about technology is it's democracy for all. It elevates the entire, you know, society. And so when you teach code, you need to also say that people who can translate consumer requirements into product specifications are just as important as those who code. So we've got to make sure we don't just go out there and say, you got to code, because it's not true. It's not accurate reflection of how the world works. And we don't want to turn kids off from another subject that they may not be that good at. So we want to have them embrace the whole process, understand how it works, understand how it drives a business and what it means, how it translates into products. And there's, you know, so many skills you can learn along that way. So that's why entrepreneurship is a great way of teaching code and technology, because it teaches you the whole picture.
Could I just ask a question? Because in our country we lack IT skills, but we also have the significant problem that females don't seem to want to acquire those skills. There's a huge underrepresentation of females when it comes to IT universities or IT education. Has the UK found a way to deal with that?
No, not yet. But it's funny because in society we make celebrities out of sports heroes, and you know, entrepreneurs are not celebrities in the UK, but they are in the US. Mark Zuckerberg is a celebrity. You know, Steve Jobs before him, you know, Bill Gates and Larry and Sergey from Google. So they're celebrities, and we need to change that mentality. We need to make entrepreneurship cool. You know, we need to hold these people up as examples and you know, start as a culture, you know, not revering them, but you know what I mean, putting them up on a pedestal in the place where they deserve, because we do that so much with sports figures. Yes, sorry. Marissa Mayer. I love Marissa Mayer. She's doing a great job at Yahoo. She's one of my former colleagues at Google, and she's just dynamic and amazing. So there's a lot of great women in technology. Not as many as we need, but we can change it.
You have some comments, Your Excellency?
Well, there are many questions on the table at the same time here. It would be fantastic if the entrepreneurs could have the same kind of impact as football players on our young. We have the same scene in Sweden, where the IT industry, if I call it that, is very male-dominated at the top. But we have also seen that when we introduce iPads and computers in the educational system from very early age, we see no big gender differences. Also, girls adapt as much as boys. Sometimes they do different things. The boys tend to go into playing war games, and the girls do not. But there are also well, we see no difference, to be very honest. And I think you have a point in saying that to start a business, it's probably better if you know something, actually better than someone else. And this is the one thing we can see where young people know more than older people. So they definitely have an advantage. So what we have felt is that we need to get them acquainted with the concept of actually having a business of their own. And that has been very much the Employers Association in Sweden, but we have supported this, that were introduced in different parts of the schooling system, that they actually have startup business where they can actually form an idea and start a company, which is not a company in itself, but as if they were running a company. And that has really changed the mindset of many young people, because I follow a lot of this. They take more for granted that they can actually start a business, and the one thing they probably then know more is like ICT or IT related. So that is one thing that has been important in Sweden. I think it's very also important to say that resources given to research and development is very important here, because a lot of these resources, and they are very much state funded, is actually what is driving a lot of the knowledge-based economy in different parts of what we are discussing. But we also have the same picture as Denmark, that this first early stage and the very early stage and the third stage and whatever you call it, it's more or less all state funded. And that is quite problematic, because that also gives ground for discussions if it's fair, because when do the state intervene and when do we say no, and who is saying yes and no? It's not the lack of money in my country, it's not the lack of these families that were mentioned, but they would put investments much later, much more secure investments in real startups when the idea is really on the market, when it's more actually employing people and it's already close to making profits. So that's where we are. We have also introduced a deduction actually to angels. It's starting now to see if we can change this. But I think it's a little bit problematic that it's so state-dominated, all the capital in the early stages. And we haven't really found a way out of that, to be honest.
Thank you. So I'll actually shift the discussion a little bit, if I can, to the other side of the conversation, and come back to Jaan Priisalu's presentation. And really around the data divide between countries. And I think it's interesting this presentation talked about the data flow between countries, whereas most of the discussion until now in e-governance has been within an individual country. And there are a lot of open data initiatives in I think all of these countries. And so this is something new. Maybe the question is, the first one is, how do these fit together? Right, because there are a lot of initiatives. There's the UK gov.co.uk, right, and there's initiatives I know Stockholm City has and others. How do these fit together with cross-border data initiatives? Petteri, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I love the Estonian X-Road project. And it's actually the same problems that. Kind of apply cross-border, also apply within a country. So the idea with X-Road and what Finland is now doing is to create a unified, unified public-private service architecture, so that the public IT systems and private IP systems can work together. And if you have such an architecture, after that, like opening it cross-border is actually relatively easy. And what I would like to see is a European architecture, that there would be something that everyone could join. And I think Estonia and Finland are now trying to cooperate. So why don't we create a standard like GSM used to be, but instead this would be a public-private service architecture. So, and maybe the X-Road could be the basis for that. It's a very lightweight, like a message bus. So it can be applied anywhere and with all different kinds of applications. And one thing that I'm very excited about is that, Finland is, of course, an extremely small market, even for startups. But if you look at the government IT spending, it's like health, for example, there's billions and billions there. So opening that market is super important for startups and basically competition.
Yes, you have a comment?
Yes, there seems to be a lot of waste on a European scale from having a lot of public sectors reinvent the wheel. Because we are, to some extent, we all have the same kind of system needs. Obviously, we are at different levels of maturity. But every time EU comes up with a new thing that needs to be added to a system, every country is sitting reinventing the wheel, as a matter of fact. And one of the things we're working with in my country is basically we have now a little group of people who look through all state systems trying to all state new systems, trying to de-risk them, and trying to also beginning potentially also to prioritize them. And one of the things we always ask is, have you shared knowledge with anybody on a European level? Is there something that is smarter outside of this country? Instead of us starting to reinvent the wheel, can we go to another institution in our own country, or the UK, or Norway, or Sweden, or other countries, and find ways of applying this kind of solution that gives us new ideas and make us better? But and you're absolutely right in saying that one of the steps you need in order to have the ability to make systems become compatible across borders is basically a similar infrastructure. We're nowhere near having that, but I think there is a lot of benefit from learning from each other step by step in order to create this potential for common public systems.
Okay, maybe one of the Estonian colleagues would want to respond.
My comment on it is that it's not expensive at all, and it's using also the international standards as much as possible. So I believe that the specification of the services are in the form of the VSTL. That is, I think that to the people who are in the web development really easily understandable, and this we spent on getting the institution to this network from 500 to 30,000 euros per institution. So it is lightweight, it's a cheap, and my point is actually to start and what seems actually the biggest obstacle is the complication of the agreements. And if we do the general European networks in the way that everybody agrees, then we are waiting always actually for the last ones. So my point is actually to start in this region, in the places where we really need actually this data communication, not simply taking the existing environment and going into it. And what I showed is the real commitment between the people to do it. So I need actually from the other countries the similar people who have the mandate actually to manage this data, and then simply exchange the services.
Signe?
Thank you. As Signe Balinga, Latvian Information and Communication Technology Association, I would like to say that people are mobile and companies are mobile all over Europe, and of course it is really necessary that we can use common cross-border service all over Europe. And for example, we have this cross-border cities, Valka and Valga with Estonia, and many citizens of Valka is living in Estonia and opposite, and of course it will be really necessary that I, with my ID card, Latvian ID card, can use Estonian services in Estonia and opposite. But I would like to say that also in Latvia we have this interoperability platform and service-based architecture for many e-government services. And I would like to say that we are really good also in business services. We are founder of European Business Register together with Sweden, Denmark, other countries. And I would like to say that this is a great option for us, for Nordic countries, to be more open, to more cooperate, because I think we all are really good in ICT, and we are really good in governance. And I would like to say that this is also a nice option to be here and to discuss together, because we need more discuss, and we just need to more cooperate with each other and to be more open with each other, because then we will win, because we need to be competitive in Europe and also in the world.
Yes?
I'll just offer two comments to it. I mean, you asked about how do the national efforts and basically the cross-border things, how can they really work together? Well, what the core idea from our side is that, well, they can very easily complement each other. And I think the core point that we're saying is that, well, the other country does not have to have a full own service infrastructure ready. Rather, we're saying it's actually much more simple based on sort of, again, the technology that is there. For example, the one that we have tested ourselves in our country, we can very easily start linking up the systems already without the other country having a full service infrastructure in place. So basically, what it needs is one pilot between each country, not just with Estonia, but even any countries that are on the table. And through that, basically, the interoperability, exactly the basic framework is done. The standard essentially is set, and you can replicate it to the other services very fast. And this is why we're sort of asking you on the table as well. Actually, would love to hear the views of others and the Prime Minister, of course. Which services do we start with?
Anyone have an answer to that? That was one of my questions.
Police data, the road violations can be exchanged, what the cars drive between Baltic countries. That could be an easy one to start with.
That's one option.
Yeah, I believe we hired the project lead from Estonia, the X-Road project lead, to learn from kind of the best practices, and I guess we also have a ongoing project where we integrate, I think it's personal health data, and that's very pragmatic and a kind of a cheap project in the government level. But after it's done, we know how to integrate other systems as well. So the barrier should be much lower after the first system.
And tissue banks and organ donation, all that stuff is obvious.
Can I ask a naive question, because this isn't at all my area of speciality? What are the data protection issues with particularly cross-border?
Does anyone have an answer?
You will definitely have this data protection obstacle. It is clear. But it's clear also that you are having them when you are joining the institution in your own country. So what we have done is the identification of the people actually who are and providing the full traceability and providing the trace to the people also who have been accessing their data. So in the citizen portal you actually can get access to the trace actually who have been viewing your data. So I believe that the privacy problem is today actually considered to be the confidentiality problem, but actually it is the process integrity problem. And it in current approach actually people are arguing that you have to make the less data available. What I'm saying is that you actually have to make more metadata about your data usage available.
And actually, like my Gmail data or Dropbox data is an order of magnitude more sensitive than my health data, and it's located somewhere in the US or wherever, and managed by a startup.
Fortunately, you don't need to get elected to your job, so some other people in this room might disagree with you.
Can you imagine the headlines in some of the British newspapers when health data is available to...
Yes, Your Excellency.
Exactly. I think you're underestimating the problems here. We are having troubles, and I respect that in Sweden, to get social services and police to actually share information about young people because they feel that there are integrity problems, and they are closely linked to each other, and they do not talk to each other about information they are having. So these are essential issues linked to that people do not want their lives to be spread out in a digital reality. So I would say these matters are crucial. It also links a little bit who is actually in the driving seat here, because probably a little bit on how you view society. Is it a politician that says, let's do this, and then everyone follows, and let's do it European-wide? I would say I think more of a society actually grows from beneath, more like market-based, solving people's problems related to the fact that people change their lives. We see an increasing amount of people living in Spain Well, they will probably then ask questions back to Sweden. How do I live here in Sweden? And how do we restructure our systems to follow the fact that a lot of people have taken this decision? This is already happening. You say that a lot of this digital thing has already happened, but we see one thing. We have now an increase in e-commerce, but it's very still nation-based. So most of the trading is actually done only in Sweden. Very little it is done cross-border. So if this is increased trade that goes cross-border, you will get solutions to many of your questions, because then you need technologically to follow what people are doing. But it hasn't really happened yet. I mean, we have now, I think, come up on the threshold where people actually are buying on the internet. A couple of years ago, they did not, because they were worried that they will be hijacked. And at the same time, I want to say, because I followed with the police, we have a trend of falling problems with crime in Sweden relate to nearly everything, apart from one thing. And that's money-related schemes linked to internet, and that is skyrocketing. So this is a real problem that is not solved, and we are redistributing what the police needs to do, because they much more need to follow the crime done on the internet, very much related to commerce, to trade, and things I now mentioned.
Yes, sorry, down the end.
I have a question related to this. Like, I used to work a lot with the environmental information, and we made it available in Finland for the public information. So how is this, you're discussing about the system, maybe regional, European, is it open for like companies also to make services on top of this information? Is it somehow going to be in a form that it can be open to the other companies? This is from SME point of view again.
In Estonia, we have actually companies in participating in this system also. But tricky is that nobody is actually having the access to the full data. The network is providing the frame, the security into the system, the encryption and logging and identification of the parties, and then each two parties actually have the service agreement between them two, and today we are giving the access to our data to private companies if they are part of some government process.
Okay, Birgit.
I was just going to comment that one of the things we're in the process of doing is taking public data and making it available for everybody, basically. Obviously starting with the least controversial from a data security point of view. But in order to spur innovation among companies, private companies who can make services based on, for instance, geographical data, or data on houses, or data on, for instance, energy classes of houses. So that is a huge program that is being gradually rolled out, where some of the debate also comes in terms of the health sector. Should some of the health systems also be opened up for you as an individual to be able to, own your own information regarding your own health, and be able to contribute to talking about how you live your life, so that doctors have more information in order to make the right prescriptions. So this is definitely a trend that will be coming, and I think there also are huge business opportunities in that.
So regarding the security part, like this system, for example, of course, in Finland, if it gets implemented, it's like really strongly encrypted and so on, and it would be monitored by the cyber security unit on 24/7 basis. So it's actually much more secure than, let's say, individual institutions managing their own systems with very limited resources. Like, those are much easier to hack than this kind of a system that's really kind of professionally managed. Then the other part is, of course, the access to data. So I think the approach there should be that we just copy the methods that the web services are using. So it's just that people can make decisions themselves. Like if you want an electronic tax application or whatever, then are you okay of sharing your information with the authority? So it's very, you opt in and it's very explicit. And today a lot of information is shared without people even knowing about it. So this could be done in a way that actually improves the current privacy situation.
Joanna?
There are 2 points here. One, we talked about, we're also in Britain, we have something called the Open Data Institute. It's headed by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who you know is founder of the internet. And they're looking at the non-controversial data sets and what should be opened up to the public. Like we just had a hack in Tech City, we call it a hack. And we brought engineers together, and our CTO of the government brought everyone together to look at, in this case, it was around the NHS booking system. So it's not your appointment with the doctor, but it's how you make that appointment, how you facilitate that. So opening up just that section, which doesn't compromise anyone's private data, but gets the best sort of service created that then gets bolted on to the government experience. And so I think in some ways we're able to do that locally, but we are not able to do anything that helps cross-border. Like again, everything that's being done is being done bespoke for the country because of the sort of legacy systems and things that exist. So there is a huge opportunity, you know, a 5-10 year horizon where we could actually look at things that could be shared from a common infrastructure. I don't know what those things are, but I'm sure there are things that we could do that could be cross-border and support, you know, many economies.
Thanks, and maybe a final word from Jaan before we close.
Some comment about digitalizing the access to the data is that yes, each year actually we're having the problem with some stupid policeman actually misusing the rights. But if we actually compare it to the paper-based system, then those guys were not caught in the time when the data was not digital. If we actually made also in the bank the comparison of the internet banks and money in the branches, then the difference of the security was 6,000 times.
Okay, thanks. So I'm afraid we're going to have to stop because we have a very tight schedule. But if I can just shortly sum up, so I think the first part of the discussion around the ICT environment focused mainly on addressing the issue of investment, especially of exit and stock exchanges, also the issue of education in entrepreneurship. And then on the e-governance, there's this question of where to start. Obviously, the quick conclusion we're coming to is start with something that's not controversial, doesn't impact data rights, but there are obviously opportunities to do some more cross-border work there. So, with that, I'd like to thank you all for taking part, and wish you a good Northern Forum for the rest of the day. Thank you.